We have this news. Morgan Stanley is planning to shutter its banking business in Russia by 2020. The company says U.S. and European sanctions are just making it too hard for business in Russia to access global capital markets. But there's a much bigger issue. Vladimir Putin is throwing Americans who work there in prison. There, meaning in different companies. The man who ran the largest hedge fund in Russia is here, Bill Browder. But don't ask him whether you should set up a mutual or hedge fund in Russia. He barely escaped by the skin of his teeth after growing his Hermitage Capital Fund in Moscow to $5 billion. But in 2009, his lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, uncovered a massive tax fraud committed by Russian government officials. Magnitsky was arrested, tortured, and beaten to death in a Moscow prison. Bill Browder is still wanted today by Vladimir Putin, but he's here with us and joins us first on Fox Business. Not only does he want you, he's asked Interpol 7 times to grab you anytime you travel and send you to Russia.
So not just once, not twice, but 7 times. I was arrested last summer in Madrid. I was going to Madrid to give evidence to the Spanish prosecutor about Putin's money laundering crimes in Spain. And I got grabbed on a Russian Interpol arrest warrant then. And they most recently, after the European Union started talking about sanctioning Russia, named after my lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, they issued a 7th request to Interpol.
And what's happening this week or tomorrow? You say, is Interpol actually considering putting you back on the red notice list?
Interpol is actively considering it at the 7th request after rejecting the first 6 as being illegitimate and politically motivated.
Does this mean you will not travel? Like, what are you going to do here?
No, I'm traveling, but I only travel to countries that I believe have a rule of law.
It's almost as if Russia is doubling down. If you look at what's happening to American business executives there are 2 currently who are in prison who've been nabbed for who knows what charges, espionage, Paul Whelan and Michael Calvi. What does the overall message of these new arrests tell you of how dangerous it is to do business in Russia?
Basically, Russia has always been a dangerous place to do business, but it's gotten more dangerous now. Putin doesn't care what it looks like from the outside. You risk not just losing your money, but in these 2 cases, as you've seen, you risk going to jail. And when you go to Russian jail, this is like one of the worst jails in the world. As you mentioned in your introduction, Sergei Magnitsky, my lawyer, was tortured to death in a Russian jail in 2009, working for the largest foreign investor in Russia.
But people here are all just looking to make a buck. Do they come up to you and say, oh, I can do what you couldn't accomplish? And what do you tell them about if they're interested in going to Russia to do business?
I tell them that Russia is uninvestable. I say that it's completely uninvestable. You shouldn't go there. Don't risk your money. Don't risk your life. I don't think anyone here is thinking about going to Russia and setting up an investment fund.
You did something very few civilians have ever done. You lobbied Congress and got a bill passed to made into law the Magnitsky Act, which, of course, slaps all kinds of sanctions and eliminates visas and freezes assets on, Russians and anybody who's accused of the human rights violations. I have to ask you, though, because you've told me in the past that the Trump administration, the administration overall, has been way tougher than the past 3 presidents on the Russians when it comes to sanctions. And yet, he just had a phone call a Friday ago with Vladimir Putin for 90 minutes that he initiated, apparently. And how do you square the relationship he has with how tough the administration has been?
Well, I have to revisit the tough administration point. Every year in December, the U.S. government adds more people to the Magnitsky list. Last December was the first time since the law was passed that the government, the U.S. government, the Trump administration, has not added anybody or even reported to Congress, which they're required to do under the law, what they're doing on the Magnitsky list. And so now we're in a situation where I hope that they come out and show their cards and show that they are continuing to be tough, because I've always believed that the administration is full of clear-headed people about Russia in terms of sanctions and in terms of Vladimir Putin.
Putin apparently told President Trump, I don't want to do anything bad in Venezuela.
That's just an outright lie. They sent in hundreds of troops to support Maduro as he was about to fall. And in fact, I would speculate that Maduro would have already fallen had had the Russians not been there. And this is just what the Russians did in Syria. There are hundreds of thousands of dead people in Syria and millions of refugees because the Russians went in and supported Assad.
Yeah, I don't believe Putin when he says, oh, he's magnanimous when it comes to Venezuela. One last thing. What kind of tentacles does this guy have? A beluga whale was discovered off the coast of Norway, and it had a Russian-made harness around it, as if they were training it by the Russian Navy. I think we have some pictures of this. I mean, what's going on there, and does he want world domination?
Well, he's never going to achieve world domination. His economy is the size of the state of New York. His military budget is 90% less than the United States. But he's poking around where it's cheap. He's poking around. I don't know how much it costs to train a whale, but it's not hundreds of millions of dollars.
Bill, I loved your book, Red Notice, but let me just say, and you know this, he does not like you. He would like you not to be alive. What is your biggest fear?
Well, my biggest fear right now is being arrested as I cross a border on a Russian arrest warrant and having a country that's compliant with Putin hand me over. If I get handed over to the Russian government, I will be killed.
Bill Browder, let's make sure that never happens. Thank you so much.
Thank you.